Welcome to Homegrown Tales, a live storytelling event held at Brews, 2 Pinot Spring in Eureka Springs. The following was recorded August 6th, 2025. And now here's Zeek Taylor to introduce the program.
Hello, everybody, and good to see you tonight. Welcome, everyone, and now Sandra is going to introduce our guest musician.
We have a new musician tonight. We're really excited to have Jeremiah Griffin. He is a Northwest Arkansas-based singer, songwriter, musician, advocate, and educator. His approach to interpreting favorite songs and writing new music is the same, finding the honest, real emotion at the heart of each story. We like that. With soulful vocals and a unique guitar style, Jer Griffin music lays his heart on the line with every note of songs like Gone Baby Gone, Seven Robins, and The Wild Look. Please welcome Jeremiah.
Boy, you hold on, oh, I'm gone, baby gone.
Our first reader is my Tales co-producer, Zeek Taylor. Zeek is a recipient of the Arkansas Governor's Arts Award for Lifetime Achievement. He has appeared on the NPR show Tales from the South, and a StoryCorps interview with Zeek is on file in the Library of Congress. Zeek, earlier this year, was one of 6 Northwest Arkansas seasoned professional artists selected to participate in the Generational Journeys program. As part of the program, he mentored a Thaden High School senior who documented his life. The documentation is now a permanent part of the archives of the Senator Pryor Center in Fayetteville and will soon be available online. Zeek is a published author, and his most recent book is Out of the Delta, the anthology. Now, here's Zeek.
Thank you. During my childhood, my family made frequent trips to Memphis, Tennessee. As we approached the river bridge, I would sit up straight to get the best view of the Mississippi River. Crossing the bridge was the gateway to visiting the Overton Park Zoo or to participate in a shopping adventure in the city's downtown. I would beg my daddy to drive slowly across the bridge. I wanted to relish the view of the river as long as possible. I wanted to see the barges, watch the fishermen on the banks. At times the river was low with wide expanses of exposed bank, while during the rainy season the water came close to Riverside Drive, the road that ran along beside it. When I was a kid, I loved maps. The waistband in my childhood bedroom had a relief map of the United States on it. I studied it, and I knew that the Mississippi River cut a slash through the nation, and it divided it into east and west. I was glad that Arkansas was by the river on the east side. The river was about 45 miles from my house. When I moved to Memphis to attend the Memphis College of Art, I was just minutes from the river. I was able to spend time on its banks. One of my college classmates had worked on the river during the summer break. He had been a steward on the steamboat, the Delta Queen. The big paddle boat often visited Memphis. One time while I was docked there, the friend who had worked on the boat asked if I would like to go aboard. I jumped at the chance. During the tour, we visited cabins and saw the grand staircase, in the ballroom. Because he was friends with the crew, we were able to go below and see the operational parts of the steamboat. The next day, we returned to the dock and watched the Delta Queen depart. When it left port, colored smoke poured from the boat's large calliope pipes, and Stephen Foster tunes filled the air. I had chill bumps. While living in Memphis, I met my soon-to-be life's partner, Dick. He had lived in Memphis for many years, and from him I learned a great deal more about the river. His father had worked on the Mississippi as a tugboat mechanic. When Dick told me that his father had never learned to swim, I thought, it's strange that he had worked on the river. Even though I knew how to swim, I found the dark and mysterious river to be somewhat scary. Dick and I spent many summer afternoons on the river at Engineers Beach. The beach was an area just across the bridge on the Arkansas side, where the Corps of Engineers placed sand that had been dredged from the river channel to accommodate large boat navigation. Except for an occasional knee-deep wade, no one dared to swim in the Mississippi. It was rough, dangerous, muddy, and filled with sinkholes and whirlpools. There was a family section on the sandy beach near the point of entry. Further down was a party section for young folks. And near the end of the long sandy beach was the gay area. The last part of the gay section was a designated nude beach. Everyone who visited Engineers Beach was respectful of each other's favorite place to Sunday on a hot, sultry Delta summer afternoon. In the spring of the year, the annual Cotton Carnival took place in Memphis. There were several Egyptian-themed carnival crews that were secret societies. Members of the crews were wealthy Memphians, the city's elite. The most well-attended carnival event was the arrival of the royal barge. The decorated barge held the carnival king and queen, the royal court, and the maid of cotton. Additional barges carried debutantes. Dick and I, and what seemed to be all of Memphis, would go down to the riverbank to watch the barges arrive. The royals and the young women would disembark with great fanfare before getting into limos, heading downtown to ride in the carnival parade and attending lavish balls. Young women debutantes were splendidly dressed in virginal white, and they were escorted ashore by handsome tuxedo-clad young men. Dick and I, along with thousands of other common folk, watched the pageantry from the riverbank. When the sun went down, a massive fireworks exhibition took place. The fireworks were ignited on Mud Island, which set in the river. The colorful display was reflected on the water. It was two shows in one, with the up show in the air and the down show on the water. While members of the city's high society attended the balls, the rest of us would enjoy the carnival midway. My favorite times spent on the Mississippi River were when Dick and I visited the grounds of the Unitarian Church on the river. It sat on the river's bank. We would go at night, sit on the blanket, and watch lighted barges slowly pass by the city. We were often alone with only the sounds of the river serenading us. I thought about how the river had passed by that spot for centuries, and I hoped that long after I was gone, it would still be winding its way to the Gulf. While sitting there, I felt at peace. In times of stress, I go back there in my mind and visit my old friend, the Mississippi River. It just keeps it rolling along. And I am very happy to introduce our next reader, and that is Crescent Dragonwagon. Crescent's 54 traditional published books encompass 5 genres and include a Coretta Scott King Award winner, a James Beard Award winner, and a New York Times notable book. She is a co-founder of the Writers' Colony at Derry Hall, now in its 25th year, and is the developer and teacher of fearless writing and the literary executor to her late mother, Charlotte Zolotow. Currently working on a memoir, Dragonwagon. Has 2 new books published in 2022. In 2018, she wrote and performed in Until Just Moistened, a one-woman show with crumbs at Theater Squared in Fayetteville. I was fortunate enough to see it. It was really good. A resident of Eureka Springs for 30 plus years, she now lives in Fayetteville with her husband, cyber defender Mark Graff. And I have to mention that I claim Crescent as my chosen sister. So here's my sister, Crescent Dragonwagon.
Thank you, Zeek, and thank you, friends. Thank you, community. It's always remarkable to come back to Eureka. This piece is called Over and Over. It was written in 2012. So just figure that into the dates, because there's age mentioned. I'm no longer the age that I was. It's called Over and Over. It was published in The Horn Book, which is a magazine that goes out to educators, librarians, that is about children's books, book reviews. So here we go. Quote, "Once there was a little girl who didn't understand about time," end quote. So, with deceptive simplicity, for who of any age does understand time, did my mother, Charlotte Zolotow, begin her book Over and Over, first published in 1957. As I write these words today, Charlotte is 97 and I am 59. I see to her care. When she wrote Over and Over, she was 42 and I was 4, and she saw to mine. It is also fall, maybe her last on this green and gold spinning globe. At this intersection, Over and Over, about cycles, seems to me celebratory, bittersweet, and comforting. Its meaning and text, first read aloud to me by my mother before I myself was able to read, seem almost as enduring as the cycles of death and renewal themselves. 28 years after its original publication, Over and Over was reissued in hardcover in 1985, published again in paperback in 1995. The unnamed little girl in Over and Over, who doesn't understand about time, and note please that Charlotte doesn't add the word yet, is at a cusp, the border between the hardly differentiated passage of days, weeks, months, and a dawning sense of memory. She hasn't connected what makes sequential time, but she does hold pieces of it. They move unconnected in a dreamlike deja vu. This happened before, didn't it? Quote, "She was so little she didn't know about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday," Charlotte wrote. "She certainly didn't know about January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. She was so little, she didn't even know summer, winter, autumn, spring." Quote, end quote. And how thoughtful of Charlotte to kindly enumerate these compass points, just in case a young listener might be in the same predicament as the little girl. Quote, "She remembered a crocus once, but she didn't know when," Charlotte continued. "She remembered a snowman, a pumpkin, a Christmas tree, a birthday cake, a Thanksgiving dinner, and Valentine's. But they were all mixed up in her mind," end quote. When the little girl awakens one morning to snow, her excitement is palpable, at least to her mother, who slowly and gently explains winter. But the little girl has a question. What comes next? She and her mother continue through seasons and holidays, noting spring rabbits, summer vacations, and, quote, "the ghosts and witches and tigers and tramps and devils," end quote, that come at Halloween. After each explanation, the little girl asks her mother, "What comes next?" Thus, the book travels a full turn on the year's wheel. Those who study children's literature might describe Over and Over as a concept book, for it teaches the concept of time's passage, life's cycles, days, weeks, months, adding up to a year, which then repeats. But this classification no more captures over and over's essence than a chloroformed butterfly pinned to black velvet touches a living monarch fanning its wings on the petals of a red bergamot blossom. The essence of over and over is its blend, everyday and wondrous. The reassurance of routine and predictable cycles, and the exhilaration of large and small miracles that come and go. Over and over gets across life force, the alternating current of permanence with transition. Now, as Charlotte approaches 100 years, she and the little girl in Over and Over stand at similar cusps. The little girl is leaving babyhood, the timelessness of life's beginning, to enter childhood and the eventual time-bound phases of adulthood. Charlotte is in the process of returning to a state unbound by time. All the things she has seen, done, and experienced in her long, interesting life are, as Over and Over put it, mixed up in her mind. She too is dreamlike. Sometimes people, objects, ideas she remembers break from the depths and float up. Sometimes she communicates what has surfaced to me and her other caregivers, usually without context. But unlike the little girl, she does not ask, what comes next? It seems this is no longer an important question. That things are mixed up in her mind does not, at this point, upset her. Rather, her glimpses of déjà vu delight her and those of us who hear them. Charlotte has shown me that one need not go to a yogi's cave in India to be here now. Just get old enough. You lose the past and its wounds, as well as the future with its anticipated losses. There's just now. And now, for Charlotte, who is not in pain but is safe and warm in her own home, surrounded by people who love her and look after her well, with frequent visits from a much-loved black and white cat named Tumbleweed who sleeps with her, now is generally a wondrous place to be. Still, the past does surface. Many afternoons during the week each month I spend with her, I'll go out on a walk. If she's awake when I leave the house, I'll reprise a version of the lines from her book, Do You Know What I'll Do? In it, an older sibling tells a younger one, do you know what I'll do on my walk? I'll look at the clouds and tell you the shapes when I come home. If Charlotte's awake when I return from the quiet streets of her small suburban Hudson River town, I'll say, Charlotte, do you remember those delicate, airy white wildflowers that are called Queen Anne's lace? A smile will break over her face, and she'll reply with some variation of, I didn't until you reminded me of it just now. When I describe people and the dogs they're walking, or children getting ice cream from a truck, a cat glimpsed in a window, her response is simply, ah, a response which conveys how adorable, how marvelous. This peaceful state has continued for about 2 years. Oh, how she suffered before that when she began to lose linear time. She yelled at me and everyone around her, a lot. Everything infuriated her. Bed rails, the wrong flavor of ice cream. I know that, don't do that. You don't understand me, you never have. The coffee wasn't even hot. They brought me lukewarm coffee. If they brought it to you, wouldn't you be angry? A brutal phase. We went through 17 caregivers in 3 years. I found notebooks and calendars she'd kept earlier in which she'd written Monday, then Tuesday, Wednesday, wed day, remember, think, Charlotte, think, and similar disjointed self-reminders, some written many times over. That phase of aging is heartbreaking. Elders have not yet let go, but though they grip furiously, they know they cannot keep holding on. I saw my aunt, Charlotte's older sister, go through a similar phase. They were both so angry at what they perceived as pending helplessness. I grieved for and with my aunt and with Charlotte, tried to be patient. If you know that control of your own life is slipping away, I came to understand, you try to control everyone else's. I could not have anticipated that things were about to change. As I said, I spend 1 week each month with her in her home, the same home I grew up in and where she still lives. Her bedroom is now downstairs, not upstairs, and she lives not alone as she did from age 60 to 82, nor with 2 children and a husband, as she did when she was a young wife and mother. Her days are shared with round-the-clock caregivers, Jamaican and African. Young, Charlotte loved the music of Vivaldi and Telemann. I made an effort to have CDs by those composers played for her, especially when she was waking up. But now she seems, improbably, to much prefer the music of the Senegalese singer Youssou N'Dour, introduced by Hawa, her Mauritanian Guinean caregiver. How can I tell? I never saw Charlotte dance to Vivaldi or Telemann, or for that matter, dance at all. But now, even though she is bedbound and can no longer stand, I have seen her sit forward some morning when she is partially raised in her hospital bed and simply sway, smiling. Sometimes she even lifts her arms, moving them in time to the marimbas, the gentle acoustic beat, N'Dour's voice singing in words neither of us understands. Moving in time, too. Time again. These moments are in time, yet out of it. I am amazed. My mother? As brilliant and insightful a writer as she was, Charlotte was also, when she was in what we call, perhaps wrongly, her right mind, often demanding, perfectionist, tense, driven. You don't write more than 100 children's books and become vice president of a major New York publishing house without being driven. To see her now swaying and smiling, and to ask her, "Are you happy?" and hear her say, "Yes," and not "yes, but," is an undreamt of privilege and surprise. Charlotte divorced her husband, my father, show business biographer Maurice Zolotow, in 1969. They remained friendly until his death in 1991. As for the children, they grew up and moved away, as children do. Charlotte's son, my brother Stephen, grew up to be a professional poker player. I stayed loosely in the family business, literature. A few years back, I was sitting in an attorney's office with Stephen. Charlotte's royalties were being discussed. "Well, some of her books," said my brother, who is highly literate in finance, "are always going to sell, like Mr. Rabbit and The Lovely Present. They're, what would you call them, cash cows?" I looked at him, bemused, and said, "In the trade, we call them classics." Though straight faces and a flat emotional affect are de rigueur in both poker and law, both my brother and the attorney half smiled. A classic, by definition, endures. The point at which Charlotte's over and over protagonist steps into the river of time, not the Mississippi, is winter. The first event discussed is snow, the first holiday, Christmas. The girl and her mother travel on through Valentine's Day, Easter, spring, summer, seasons, celebrations. Finally, after Thanksgiving, seemingly replete with the wonders of the year, the little girl asks, "Does anything come now?" "Oh yes," said her mother. "The next thing that comes is a very special day, your birthday." Birthday. Mine is in late November. Yes, usually after Thanksgiving, like the little girls. My mother's is in June. Charlotte dozed during the first part of her last birthday party. So perhaps when she asked me, "What did I miss?" she may have meant while she was half asleep that day, listening as people came and went, as food was eaten, bottle caps flipped, as laughter and conversation rose and fell. But I chose a different context. "Well, Charlotte," I said, "it's your 97th birthday today. We're on your porch for the party, and let's see. You wrote many, many books. You helped hundreds of other people write their books. And you read thousands of books. You were married. You had 2 children. You had a lover. You had a garden. You traveled all over America and went to Europe several times. You were head of a department. You went to great museums. You had a poodle named Cleo, and now you have a cat named Tumbleweed. You ate Chinese food and French food, Italian and Indian food, and now, today, you're eating African and Jamaican food. I don't think you missed much. Charlotte started smiling as I began this recitation, and her smile grew wider and wider as I continued. She began laughing. When I finished, she said, "Good." Not long after that, we brought out the cake, and with help, she blew out the candles. When the little girl does that over and over, she makes a wish. "What did you wish?" everyone asked her. "I wished for it all to happen again," the little girl said. And of course, over and over, year after year, it did. So ends Over and Over, a book that will last, I believe, as classics do. But Charlotte herself will not and cannot last. I will grieve all the harder, I think, yet also be better able to let go because of the surprise of our time together now, a gift following a relationship which, though close, was always conflicted. When a parent dies, a life ends, and another life is permanently altered. Something that was is no more. It can't all happen again. And yet, I will be left when Charlotte goes, not only with her books and the cycle themselves that she enumerated so well, but with something she said to me recently. It was late. We were having a long, rambling conversation, which happens rarely, but occasionally. I never know if such a conversation will be our last, since there are days when Charlotte does not speak at all. We were in the dark, me sitting by the hospital bed in the room that had once been the family living room, but is now her bedroom. Charlotte has lost many teeth. She speaks softly and slowly, so to hear her, I had to lean in closely and listen with full attention. Here is what she said that night. "Since I've had all the days, and they were wonderful, I want you to do the same."
I can hardly speak after that. That was so beautiful. Jeez, need a hanky. Anyway, you can see why she is such an acclaimed writer and author of so many books, and why I chose her to be my sister. I mean, who wouldn't, right?
You're so much better than my brother.
Oh, good to know. So I have another dear friend here with me who is my co-producer and also a brilliant writer, and that is Sandra Spotts. Sandra has written for several Central Arkansas publications, I've got tears in my eyes, sorry, and made 12 appearances telling her original stories on the internationally broadcast radio show Tales from the South. Sandra has a background in fine arts that began with work as a fiber artist. She has been an art teacher and has worked as a professional designer. For the past several years, she has called Eureka Springs home, where she continues her art career as an abstract expressionist painter, and thankfully she's still writing. Here's Sandra.
Thank you, Zeek. This is called Backyard Baseball in Beverly Jean. Nothing made those last drawn-out school days more bearable for a 9-year-old than the warm spring nights of playing neighborhood baseball. Well, technically it was softball, but we never used the term. Why say anything that would distance us from the great players, Babe Ruth, Jimmy Pearsall, and native son Dizzy Dean. For on those afternoons, in our imaginations, we were playing alongside them. Sister and I were the only girls in our older neighborhood, which had barely enough kids to divide into teams. My guess is the fact that we were warm bodies led to our being accepted in the first place by the boys, until we had proven ourselves as pretty good players who did not whine. And besides that, we had been playmates of Bo and Joe, our next-door neighbors, for as long as I could remember. The short supply of boys living in the area had raised our stock, and the younger brother, Bo, would even occasionally play house with me if no other boys were within range to find him out. Beverly Jean would trespass, as we saw it, into the neighborhood to visit her grandparents, the Roberts, who lived just behind and across the alley from Bo and Joe, the owners of the backyard that became our field of dreams every May afternoon. She lived in some hinterland like Benton or Sherwood or some other foreign location a good 15 or 20 miles away from Little Rock. Apparently, she had not been exposed to many kids other than in school because she had not learned how to approach the group with the right dose of cool. Her too obvious eagerness to play made us embarrassed for her. And worst of all, more than once, she wore a dress. The Roberts were a scary lot. Mister had a huge red ham of a face. And let it be known that no kid, except for his precious granddaughter, would survive passage through his yard. The missus, as far as we knew, had never set foot on land. She was only sighted occasionally at the back screen door, glaring at any kid who wandered within 50 yards of the house. Ensuring that the perimeters were never breached was King, the evil Chow Chow, who protected the property and struck fear into the hearts of anyone under the age of 30 by barking incessantly with a hair down his back, standing on end, exposing his satanic black tongue, ringed with pointed yellow teeth. It never occurred to us that the chain that tethered King to the clothesline limited his reign of terror. We just knew he meant business, and the point was well taken. We could count on a visit from Beverly Jean 3 or 4 times a season. A collective groan was emitted whenever she was spotted crossing the alley, jumping the ditch, and bouncing into the yard with a screechy, "Can I play?" We all knew Southern manners, backed up by our mamas, required the communal answer, yes, although nobody ever said that we had to sound happy about the situation. Besides, the fear of her grandparents letting King loose on all of us was always in the back of our minds. The greatest breach by Beverly Jean, as we saw it, in the words of that era, was that she played, well, like a girl. I was a girl, my sister obviously was a girl, but we had been taught the fundamentals by Daddy, who had been a drill sergeant during WW2. So there was no room for girliness in our house when it came to playing sports, having hurt feelings, or accepting the application of mercurochrome or Vicks salve to anything that might be skinned up or stopped up. For what she lacked in sports skills and social skills, Beverly Jean had a flair for the dramatic, which only heightened our view of her as a strange bird. She bounded up to the plate, took the bat, holding it way too high up with hands at least 6 inches apart. Then she launched into her chant. "I'm going to choke up on this bat. I'm going to choke up on this bat. I'm going to choke up on this bat and hit me a home run." Then she would swing up and down as if she were casting a fishing rod. Needless to say, this technique only got her 3 swift strikes and a lot of snickers, to which she seemed oblivious. She slung the bat a good 20 yards and stomped back across the alley, buttering some sort of sing-song kid cussing, slamming the screen door to her grandparents' house. If only she could hit the ball that far, or at all. When my time came to bat, I stepped to the plate, took my stance first as a right-hander for the first pitch, and then, newly aware of switch hitters, batted next as a lefty. When you are left-handed in an all right-handed family, you learn to do tasks the right way, but then pop back into what feels natural. My heart was racing and my hands were sweaty. I had the added pressure of being not only a GIRL, but the youngest of the bunch as well. The first pitch sailed by my shoulder, and I swung so hard I whacked myself in the back of the head with the bat. "Strike!" the other team yelled, way too long and way too loud. On the second pitch, I slammed the bat into the ball, sending it through the scraggly yard, over the ditch, across Maryland Street, past the sidewalk, and over the Oglesby's fence. The outfielder had to run to the end of the fence to field the ball, buying me some time to round the flattened cardboard box bases and to arrive safe at home. I thought about poor Beverly Jean, but not for too long. I was too full of my own glory to waste much time on someone else's share of pity. I turned and I looked at the Roberts' back door, and I saw Beverly Jean standing there, smiling and waving. We might have hurt her feelings, I thought. It's a sin to hurt people's feelings. Do unto others. But she's smiling at me. Oh, she'll be back, choking up on that bat, and not hitting her a home run. We called it quits, and Sister and I were lured back to our house by Daddy's supper time whistle and the aroma of fried pork chops, fried potatoes, and fried okra. Some of the guys hung around catching the first lightning bugs of dusk and playing Swing the Statue. For some reason, on this muggy spring evening, I wanted to run to that whistle to tell Daddy it had been a great day. I had played like a real girl, a drill sergeant's girl. Thank you. Here's another one that goes way back. This is called Home Ick. So bad. Life in the South during the early 1960s was still driven by the social mores of the past. Gender rules were unbendable. In junior high school, boys were assigned to shop class and girls were in home ec without exception. My 7th grade home ec class was sewing, and their teacher was Mrs. Spikes. She was a tall, slender, attractive woman who moved with both precision and grace. She was a very prim and proper Southern belle, determined to teach etiquette along with sewing to her awkward preteen charges. I later learned she had been a state beauty queen at the time when young ladies who wore tiaras and represented counties or cities or organizations were expected to conduct themselves in exemplary fashion. Mrs. Spikes was obviously a perfectionist who seemed to be offended by even an honest error in her presence. Her displeasure became comical, displayed in an immediate, repeated batting of the eyelashes. Of course, this mannerism was mocked anytime she turned her back. After all, this was junior high. Mrs. Spikes prevented mistakes when we sewed our garments, the dowdy cotton gathered skirts that were the fashion when paired with a white blouse. Anyone remember? Anyone? We were required to take the garment to her for pinning the 6 or so inches we were allowed to stitch before another check. The net result for most of us was a lack of concept of how we were actually constructing the garment. At the end of her class, I still had no idea. During the next summer, my family moved, and I began 8th grade at a new school. Home ec was still a required subject, but with sewing to be taught in one semester and cooking in the other. Where Mrs. Spikes was overly cautious to produce perfectly constructed garments rather than teach us overall concept, Mrs. Cannon's teaching technique was, you have your pattern, you have your fabric, now don't bother me and go make a dress. She clearly was jaded and would rather be anywhere than in a classroom. I was way over my head, and my finished product reflected it. The impending horror was it would all be revealed in a school-wide fashion show the next week. This little number had an uneven waistline about 2 inches too high and several inches too big around, with a too long hem length. We were allowed to take our dresses home to be ironed by our mothers before the big day of shame. Fortunately, my mother was an excellent seamstress with almost the same perfectionism as Mrs. Spikes, but without the eyelash matting. That weekend, she corrected the length, and Big Sister suggested we could fake the waistline errors with her 3-inch brown belt, which was very in fashion. So maybe I wouldn't have to flee school in humiliation. Maybe I could live another day. Fashion showtime came, and I managed to disguise the fiasco I was wearing, which never again would see the light of day. After the assembly, we returned to homeroom, where our mild-mannered teacher, Mr. Jones, complimented us girls on our fine job. As we left for our next class, Mr. Jones, obviously aware that I was shy and lacking in confidence, whispered to me, "You were the only one who could walk properly in heels." He never knew how that little kindness boosted me, and I never forgot it. On the walk home from school, I thought about how different my experiences had been. Both were extremes on opposite ends of the spectrum, and both had left me with an aversion to sewing. I thought about poor Mrs. Spikes and how overwhelmed she was trying to refine preteen girls, giving her delicate sensibilities. My memory went back to the final day of school last year in 7th grade. We had all packed up our books and 3-ring binders, ready to blast out of home ec, our last class of the year. Mrs. Spikes had instructed us to get ready to exit, but to be silent. We were just a few minutes away from the bell to signal the freedom of summer. My classmate Libby's privileged background, cotillion, and private etiquette lessons had not quashed her moxie. Libby's voice was the only sound in the room, singing quietly but clearly annoying our high-strung instructor, who issued a challenge. "Libby, if you want to sing, stand up and sing for all of us to hear." Libby immediately stood with shoulders back, hands clasped at her waist in a classic operatic pose, with her nose in the air. She began, "Great green gobs of greasy, grimy gopher guts. Greasy, grimy gopher guts. Greasy, grimy gopher guts. Great green gobs of greasy, grimy gopher guts. And I forgot my spoon." Libby, saved by the bell, swiftly made her exit while Mrs. Spikes had launched into the most rapid eyelash batting I'd ever seen. She turned to face the wall, and I imagined her eyelash flapping might cause her to become airborne. Perhaps to fly home to a very strong cocktail and a search for a new career. And here's Zeek with another tale.
Let's hear it again for Sandra. That was great. Loved it, loved it. I'm going to read two short stories, and they are both very short, and they both happened when I was 5 years old and in the first grade. And this is the first one. A couple of weeks after starting first grade, I noticed with interest and envy that a boy in my class was not wearing suspenders or overalls. Max was wearing a belt. I didn't know that they made belts for little boys. Then I saw other little boys wearing belts that were just like the ones that grown men wore. By gosh, I wanted one too. I begged and begged my parents for a belt. They finally consented. However, I had to wait until the next weekend when we could go to Graber's, a department store in nearby Perigo, Arkansas. My mother was a hairdresser. Every Saturday after she finished work, my family would load into my father's car and go to Perigo to the grocery shop to shop at Kroger. If my mother got through working early enough, we would get there in time to shop in one of the city's department stores before ending up at the grocery store. On the Saturday, when I was to get my belt, I was worried she wouldn't get through in time to go to Graber's. I was hoping that her last customer wouldn't take too long under the hairdryer. My mother did get through in time that Saturday, and we made it to the department store to buy the belt. I'm not sure I could have waited another week. The first night I had the belt on, I fastened it around my pajama bottoms, and I slept in it. I felt grown up. Thank you. And this next story, I'm reading because my friend Carla is here, founder of the Generational Journeys program. And this is one of the stories that is now on file at the Pryor Center. It's also, I'm always asked, when did you decide that you wanted to be an artist? And this answers that question. At age 5, I wanted to go to school. We did not have a kindergarten where I lived. My father was good friends with the superintendent of schools, and as a favor to my daddy, he let me start first grade a year early. My father drove me to school every morning. During the first week, every time he dropped me off, I would run down alleyways and beat him home. My parents couldn't figure out why. I had begged to go to school. I confessed that I didn't want to be away from my dog. I had a sympathetic first grade teacher, Miss Versa Butler, and she let me take my dog Jigs to school. He sat in a little seat beside me. From then on, I loved school. I told everyone that Jigs had learned his ABCs, but couldn't say the alphabet out loud because he hadn't yet learned to talk. I decided to become an artist during the first year in school. I won the grand prize in the first grade art contest with a crayon portrait that I did of my mother. I drew her hair in fabulous circles with a crayon called Mahogany, and I gave her almost perfectly round cheeks with a carnation pink crayon. As the winner, I had my choice of either a big old peppermint stick or a chickle stick, a toasted coconut-coated peanut butter stick. I chose the chickle stick and devoured my prize during the next recess. After winning the contest, there was never any doubt in my mind that I wanted to become an artist. I stuck with that plan. Thank you, and once again, I am proud to introduce, and I'm sure you're ready to hear another story by my friend, my sister, Crescent Dragonwagon.
Thank you. Thank you. There's an opaque curtain between us and our futures. Plan though we may, what happens on any given day in any given life is unpredictable. On March 9th, 2000, I woke up with my husband Ned in a hotel room in Providence, Rhode Island. We were attending the annual conference of the International Association of Culinary Professionals, IACP, where I would teach an all-day workshop called Fearless Writing. I've taught it, and still do, in many iterations. This one was subtitled, Finding Your Voice, Vitality, and Vibrancy in Culinary Writing. At 8:20 or so that morning, as I was walking across the hotel lobby towards the venue where I'd be teaching, someone, I'm embarrassed to say I can't remember which of my many pen pals it was, stopped me. She said, "Crescent, do you have room for one more person in your class?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Then we'll go over with you." I turned, and standing next to her was Julia Child. Wow. Thus began my day as a writing coach and mentor to Julia, along with another 30 or so culinary writers. You probably know Julia as the charming, iconic, delightfully goofy woman who brought cooking well with passion and exuberance to television. Or you know her versus her foundational tour de force bestseller, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Written specifically for Americans with 2 French co-authors, in this book, Child's was the distinctive American voice, approachable yet authoritative. Volume 1 of Mastering appeared in 1961, Volume 2 in 1970, and with this guide, thousands of people taught themselves to cook French style, as well as basic techniques. In 2002, Julie Powell began the Julia Project, in which she cooked all the recipes in the books within 1 year, blogging about it as she went. Mastering became a bestseller for a second time. Later, the blog, combined with Child's own last book, My Life in France, became a film. Meryl Streep played Child. I'd met Julia a few times at previous IACPs. Tall, warm, unpretentious, endearing, she possessed an irresistibly agile, curious mind. She embodied the term lifelong learner. She seemed to me eager to meet others as colleagues. While not unaware that she was a star, she chafed against being revered instead of related to. Several times we went on the same IACP culinary tours at various conference cities. We participated in one called Kosher Philadelphia, during which she and sausage maker Bruce Adels peppered a kosher butcher with questions. I'm going to actually tell one piece of this that wasn't in the story. We're in the kosher grocery store in Philadelphia, and Julia is leaning against a wall, one hand on the cane. Bruce Adels is over there. And I'm standing also in the doorway, and there was a very, very elderly, kosher Jewish woman, Orthodox, head wrapped up. And she comes to the meat counter where she always does stuff, and she says, because I'm the nearest person, she says, "What is this?" And I said, "It's a tour." And she said, "Tour? What tour?" I said, "Well, it's a culinary tour. It's a tour of Kosher Philadelphia." And she said, "Culinary? What is that?" I said, "People who cook." I said, "Julia Child is here." She marches in and stands facing Julia, and she says, "Julia Child, I wish I could cook half as good as you." And then she turns and she walks out, and as she's walking out, Julia turns and says to the back of her head, "Thank you, and you have pretty hair too." Okay. When Julia attended Fearless, she was over 85. Though widowed 6 years earlier and walking with a cane, she was as vibrantly curious as ever. I was over 45, happily married, comfortable in my twin careers as a writer and teacher of writing. Over the years, other famous writers, not just culinary ones, have taken my course side by side with beginning or aspirational writers. As a teacher, I know it is as essential not to be overawed by any individual's star power as it is to not dismiss anyone who has not yet published, but just to try and simply see each person's needs and where they are in the writing process and meet them where they are. One way I do this at the start of a session is by asking students what they'd like to leave class with. Julia was one who chose to speak up. I'd like to leave knowing how to write funnier, to get across humor on the page. When I recall that day, I remember this, and that, during the catered lunch, she asked that Ned and I sit on either side of her. Somehow, the story of my having recently made barbecued tofu at a small-town community fundraiser for the Opera Center, for the Inspiration Point Opera Center here, came up. How, she asked me, with genuine curiosity, do you make it? So, not only do I have the distinction of teaching writing to Julia Child, I actually gave her, verbally, a recipe for barbecued tofu. After lunch, class continued. One of the key points I make in Fearless is that fear and uncertainty are always part of the process. I would like to add the process of writing, the process of living, the process of resisting if a fascist government tries to sneak in with a coup from within. Fear and discomfort and uncertainty are always part of the process, that one must learn to tolerate their discomfort to grow creativity. Late in the day, a young woman in the back raised her hand. Does that ever change? She asked wearily. Do you ever get over being unsure and afraid? I took a deep breath. You know, I said, I never single out people who are well known, but because we have someone in class today who I think most of us would agree has certainly reached the apex in our field, I'm going to defer to her. I took a breath. Julia, I said, do you ever get over it? Julia, one row back from the front, gave what I remember as a delighted cackle. She picked up her cane and, whacking it on the floor for emphasis, said in that famous fluting voice, "Absolutely not!" That day, I did one other thing I never do in class. In most Fearlesses, we do a lot of writing in session. Most people take their work with them. Some throw it out as they exit, but occasionally someone will leave their writing on the table. I always throw it out, unread. After all, it's personal and private. But Julia left her pages on the table. 3 or 4 pages, handwritten. She'd torn them in half once. The room had emptied. Ned and I were gathering our stuff to go. I looked at Julia's pages lying on the table. I looked at Ned questioningly. He looked back, giving me a look which I read as, "Seriously? How can you not?" I took them, and I read them. They described Julia's arrival in France for the first time by ship on a foggy morning in 1948 with her husband, Paul. Those torn pieces are still probably in my office somewhere. Years later, I read Julia's final book, My Life in France, a memoir which was published posthumously in 2006. I recognized the scene set in the first paragraph. Quote, "At 5:45 in the morning, Paul and I rousted ourselves from our warm bunk and peered out the small porthole in our cabin aboard the SS America. With this opening, my heart opened too." 9 months after that day in Providence, Ned went out bicycling and was hit by a small pickup. Among hundreds of letters and emails of condolence was one from Julia, which is also probably somewhere in my office. Her famously good marriage to her husband Paul had lasted 48 years. She knew a happy marriage when she saw one, and she'd seen one between Ned and me. She'd liked him, and she knew grief. She also told me I would get through it, though I would always miss him. She was right on both counts. Julia herself died 2 days before her 92nd birthday in 2004. I still cook and write and teach writing. That Ned is not here amazes me still. That Julia Child once took a workshop with me, and that to this day occasionally people wash up in Fearless who tell me, "Julia always told me I should take your class." This also amazes me. That opaque curtain. I'm glad of it, hiding as it does all future surprises, terrible and marvelous, from our present size. And as for fear and uncertainty, do I still think they are always part of the process of writing, of living, and that one must learn to tolerate them? Absolutely!
Gosh, I don't know how I can say any more about how brilliant Crescent is. Let's hear it again for Crescent. Yeah. Thank you, Crescent. And I would also like to thank Brews for letting us have this event here. Thank you, Brews. Wonderful place. This is Eureka Springs living room, and it is. Also, many thanks to my friend Sandra, who works with me to co-produce these, and to Jeremiah. I hope we have Jeremiah back again. He's great. And yeah. And now Sandra is going to tell you about our next show, and it's one not to be missed. When she tells you, you'll know why.
Well, thanks for coming. We appreciate it so much. We do this both for the love of storytelling. It's something that we want to keep alive, and we do it for the love of Eureka Springs. So we appreciate you coming out and supporting us. And our next show is October the 1st, and our guests will be two favorites. Our writing guest will be Shabana Kauser, and our October guest musician will be Tim Hillwood, a local that is well loved and received. So we hope you can make it. Thanks for coming.
You've been listening to Homegrown Tales, a live storytelling event held at Brews, 2 Pine Spring in Eureka Springs. Join us again next time for more Homegrown Tales.